Hey YouTube, it's Jeff at Darkmoon Metals. Welcome back to the shop. It is a very cold day here in New England. I don't know if you could see this, but yeah, it's a bit chilly back in the shop here. I've already done a little bit of the work to prep some of the parts for the project I'm going to be showing you. Now, if you saw my last video, you would know that we are going to be talking about an iris. Now, this is an all-steel iris, and this was a project that Dana and I came up with for our mothers for Christmas. And we figured that we would take you along on this journey and show you exactly how they're put together. Now, I'm not going to go into a tremendous amount of detail on how all the parts were cut. This iris was based on a paper pattern that Dana found online. And what we did is we played with it until we got the scale to where we wanted it for our metalworking purposes. I am going to show you how we put all of the texturing inside of the petals. I'm going to show you how we shaped the individual leaves, and I am going to give you the dimensions for everything, both along as I'm talking and at the end of the video with pictures. So if you're interested in this project, all of the information will be available. For the stem, there's going to be 3 individual components. Now, this is actually 2 components already welded together. What I have here is a piece of 18-inch long 5/16 rod, and then the top of this is a 2-inch piece of 1/2-inch round. Now, in the 1/2-inch round, I've drilled a 3/8 hole, and I've drilled that hole about 1.5 inches deep. I welded the 2 pieces together, put it inside the forge, and then tapered the weld into the 5/16 round. The last component for the stem is going to be a 1.5-inch long piece of 1/4-inch round that's tapered on one end and rounded off on the other. Everything outside the stem is made from the same material. This happens to be 30 thousandths thick sheet metal. Now, the original pattern had called for only 2 leaves, but to me it just didn't look right, so I added a 3rd. So let me show you what we did for them. Here are the 3 different sizes. The longest one is 12 inches, and at the widest point it's 1 1/8. The next middle size would be 10 inches long by 7/8, and then last but not least, the smallest one is 8 inches by 3/4 at the mid part. This particular project has 2 different style petals. One has a point on the end of the scallops, and then one's just flat. I don't really see that much of a difference, especially from far away, but I guess, hey, realism. And I'm trying to stick to the, I'm trying to stay dedicated to the pattern that I chose. Now, these dimensions, again, this is 30 thousandths sheet metal. The overall length of the leaf, not including the tab, is about 3.5 inches. The tab is 1 3/4 inches. The widest point of the leaf, the petal, is 2 inches, and it tapers down to 1/4 inch, and then the entire tail is 1/4 inch long. You can make the tail as long as you want. We're going to end up trimming that later on anyway. But you're going to need 3 of each kind. First thing I'm going to do is sit down and shape the leaves. I'm going to do the medium-sized one on camera. I'm going to do the other 2 off camera. Now, what I'm going to use for this, set these aside, stick them on the forge. This is an old V-block. This thing has been beat up. You can actually tell where somebody came in here with a sander and sanded it out. It must have had something jammed in it at one time and they tried to save it, but I found this in a scrap bin. But it's still really good steel, and it's definitely the tool for the job for what I'm going to be doing here. This stuff right here, I've shown this in other videos. This is, they used to call it scooch guard. Originally this stuff was invented to put on shelves of like mobile homes, and it would keep your dishes from sliding around. Then it got turned into like a toolbox drawer liner, and you could still get that at Sears, places like that. But this, it's the same material, it's almost the same pattern, it's a little bit thinner. This you can buy as a placemat at Walmart, and it's great because it really does keep your part from sliding around too much. It's not going to bounce all over the top of your bench or the top of your anvil. Another thing I like about it, since I am doing this on the anvil, it helps deaden the sound a little bit. Now, the hammer I'm going to be using, I can't remember the proper name for this hammer. My father kept this around for auto body work, but I'm basically going to be using the cross peen on the back. If you don't have a hammer like this yet in your collection, I'm going to make a suggestion to you. This is a double-sided chipping hammer. Now, a lot of times when you find a chipping hammer for welding, you'll get a chisel and then a point. This one's really nice because you've got a cross peen and a straight peen, so when you're texturing things, it comes in really handy. You can change positions very easily with this, and all you need to do is come in with a belt sander and round off that chisel point, and it's a perfect texturing tool. I'm going to stick with my old one, my favorite one, because it's a little bit lighter and I really don't need a lot of weight for 030. And I'm going to start in the center and I'm going to work my way towards one end. Let's see if I can angle this a little bit better for you. And even with the scooch guard, it will move around. And as you can see, it's starting to form the leaf shape. Try to keep your line as close to the center as you can. And as you may notice, this is starting to want a banana a little bit. The banana I can't even speak today, it's too cold. The banana effect, the shape of that is not necessarily something that's detrimental, but you kind of want it to go the other way. You want this to fan backwards. You don't want it to come forwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to finish forming this one and the other two off camera, and I'll show you how we reverse that bow. Now we're going to reverse the bow out of these leaves. And what I'm going to use is my baseball bat wooden mallet. A friend of mine was throwing this away and I said, you know what, I could do something with that. The barrel split. That didn't split, but it tore a huge chunk of wood out of the side. And I cut out the bad part and I whittled down the handle. I drilled a hole in the head. I drilled a hole through the barrel, rather, of the bat and just shoved the handle through the barrel. And I've got a fairly good ergonomic hammer. Feels pretty good in the hand. And all I'm going to do is come in here and tap this to straighten it out. And because it's wood, you're not going to deform the leaf too much. And as you can see, that's already pretty flat. Now there's a couple of different ways you can put the reversed curve in this. One of the things that I did is I went out and found a ball bearing. I think this is a 2.5 inch diameter ball bearing that I turned into a Hardy tool. You can go right over the horn of the anvil. I myself prefer to use another wooden mallet that has a curve to the barrel so I don't mar or put marks in either side of this leaf. So let's go over and do that now with my other mallet, which is currently wedged in the vise. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of light over in this side of the shop. I hope this comes out good. What I've done is I've taken my grandfather's old wooden mallet, mounted it in the vise, and I'm going to carefully go over the side and just tap it down with the baseball bat mallet. And as you can see, there's the reverse curve in the leaf. Alright guys, I'm trying to play with the light a little bit so you can see just all the little subtle ripples in those petals, and that really is the key to making this thing look delicate, making it look like it's not really made out of steel. Granted, the paint job does help a little bit, but I want to show you how we got all of that fine texture in this material. The next tool that I'm going to show you is one of these guys. Now, this is a crimping tool that you would use on like ductwork for chimneys and things like that. I used to use this when I was in my old days hanging gutters. This was how we would crimp the downspouts from one section into the other. This is a handy tool if you're working with sheet metal and you're looking to get some interesting textures. But there's a little more to it than just this. This is the big secret. All I did was take a piece of wood, I spun it down on the lathe, made myself a handle. I drilled, I believe this is a 1/4 inch, maybe a little bigger hole. And I took pieces of stainless steel welding rod that is 1/8 in diameter and just shoved it in the hole until it stayed and won't come out anymore. I may have put a pin, I put a pin in there just so these won't come out, but this is how I textured all of the petals. And there's 4 individual pieces of welding rod in there. And you can see that this kind of tapers off to the side. This started out straight, but it just developed a natural curve as I kind of beat on it a little bit. So let me show you how this is done, or at least how I did it. You can see the shape of the leaf. Let me flip that around so you get a better view. You've got wide to narrow. So what I've been doing is coming in with this tool, laying it on top of the leaf, like so, hitting it with a hammer, flipping it over, and doing the same thing. That way I get the interesting vein pattern that you saw in the finished product. But rather than talking about it, let me just show you. For this, I'm going to be using my regular cross peen smithing hammer. And notice how I'm trying to aim the direction of these rods and fan out as the leaf fans out and opens up. So I'm working my way from one side to the other, flipping back and forth. And if these overlap, it doesn't matter. That's going to add texture to it. And I'm going to do both sides using this process. I don't know how well you're going to see that ripple effect. Let me see if I can get the camera over into the light a little bit more. Hard to tell with the paint. This does have a little bit of paint on it. There we go. Can you see the pattern? I think I can see it in the viewfinder. Alright. Now I'm going to bring each one of these petals to this point, and then I'm going to meet you back over at the bench. One of the things I learned the hard way is you really do have to plan how you paint this. You'll see why in a moment. I've got a can of Rust-Oleum green. This is called Meadow Green Gloss, and I have a can of cheapo Walmart flat black spray paint. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in and I'm going to paint about 3/4 of each leaf. I'm not going to paint the whole thing. It's probably going to take quite a while for this to dry given the temperature. Base coat of green, and just come back with the black. You don't need to do the insides really. You can if you want. I like to do it. And I just lightly mist with the black. And you could put as much or as little as you like. And we're going to leave those to dry. At this point, I would suggest separating out your petals. Keep the 3 that have the points in one pile, and keep the 3 with the flat ends in another pile. What we're going to do is take that gutter crimping tool that I showed you before, and we're just going to come in and hit the end real quick. And I'm not pressing down as hard as I can with this tool. And I also flip the leaf around and do it again. There's 2 blades on one side and there's 3 on this side, and if you just go back and forth a couple of times, it adds a lot of detail and gives you that crinkly look to the petals. And I'm going to go ahead and do that to all of them right now. And then we're going to get ready to start talking about how we're going to shape these guys. We assemble this flower from the outside, working our way in. The 3 petals on the outside are the ones that have the points, and these are also the easiest ones to make. From the tab, all it does is arc in one single direction out. The inner flowers kind of make like a question mark of sorts. So we're going to start with the outside and we'll deal with the inside ones later. Alright guys, I'm going to be shaping this over the wooden mallet that I've got lodged in the vise, and I'm going to be using my trusty baseball bat mallet that I absolutely adore. Now, I'm going to be cutting off about not quite half of this tab when I'm done shaping. The reason I keep the tab long is when I'm belt sanding, I usually have my belt sander flat. Let's say this is the contact wheel, and you've got the paper running over the top of the wheel and around, and you've got your rotation going in this direction. Well, rather than trying to deburr this by hand, what I do is I take a block of wood and I just come up under the belt and I use that little bit of extra tab just so I can keep my finger on it and it doesn't get sucked into the sander. So that's why I ultimately make the leaves, the petals longer than they need to be. Someday I'll stop calling these things leaves. But then again, I'm a blacksmith, not a botanist. And all I'm doing is pushing this from one side to the other, from left to right, and I'm hitting the same spot with the mallet. And you can see what kind of a curve that's giving me. One of the things I like to do is come up to the leading edge and just kind of hit it. You would call it maybe glancing blows. And that gives a little bit of a roll to the end of the petal. And that's all there is to shaping it. Let me finish the other 2. It is difficult to sometimes manipulate the tripod. I've got, like I said, a tight working area, but here's the overhead view I wanted to show you. Basically, you want to lay out the petals like such. Now let's work on the other inside set of petals. To make the petals that are shaped like the question mark I was talking about, I'm going to start coming off the side, hitting down, just to get my initial curve started, and then I'm going to give it one pretty good whack. And I'm going to keep working that curve. Once I have a curve that I think is, let me get it in frame here. Once I have a curve that I think is usable, I'll come back with the tab section and give that the glancing blows until I've got something that looks kind of like that. Let me complete the other 2. If we were to try to put the second row of petals in right now, they're not all going to fit and they're not going to line up right. So what you're going to need to do is get a tapered punch, grab a hammer, put the punch in the center of the 3 petals that are already in the stem, go ahead and hammer it in a couple of times. You don't want to get it too stuck. You can always fan these petals back out. What that's going to do for us is it's going to open up more of the inside of that hole by moving the material of the petals closer to the wall of our hole. Now I'm going to come in, I'm going to give these the same little trim. And what you want to do is stagger these petals so they're in between the the ones that are already in place. And this is the tricky part. This does kind of take a little bit of patience. I haven't gotten it on the first try ever. Of course, then again, this is only the fourth or fifth one of these that I made. And they're going to want to bounce around a bit. But once you get it close to where you want it, and I've got that lined up, I can tweak them from here. You're going to want to take that piece of 1/4 inch we put the taper on and get that out. That gets dropped in the opening between all of the petals, and you just kind of, let me see if I can move this over so you can see it. You just stand it up in place. Grab a nice punch with a flat bottom on it. Grab your hammer, and we're going to drive this guy home. And if these close up, don't worry about it. It's sheet metal. You could bend it back easy. Now, we'll give this a little bit of a tweak. Get it closer to where we want them. All right. That's pretty well formed the way I want. Now here's the next step. We are going to come in with a simple propane torch and some solder. Now I don't know what kind of solder this is. This damn thing was a huge 5-pound spool that my grandfather brought over on the Mayflower. I don't know if I'm ever going to use this entire thing throughout the course of my life. I'm going to give it my best shot, but there's no guarantee my grandkids may have to deal with this lump of solder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, excuse me, I'm going to heat up the center, I'm going to fill it in with sod, and that's going to increase the rigidity of the center of this bloom. Go. All right, we're just going to let that cool. So let's look at our paint scheme. This flower has 5 colors: black, green, purple, white, and gold. I'll show you why we painted the top part of the leaves first in a moment. But we're going to start off by painting about, I'd say about 6 inches of the stem. And we're going to come in with the same green we had before. I'm going to try not to get the petals. And if you do, it's not that big of a deal. Same way we did the leaves, we're going to come in with a little bit of black. And that darkens it up a little bit. It looks more natural that way. In the interest of saving time, we're going to do a baked enamel finish. Alright, the next thing we are going to do is we're going to take the purple and hope to God that there's still enough paint in this can to do the whole flower. And again, we're going to fast forward through life. Now the gold paint, how well you can see it down there, but the center of that bloom is actually gold. So we're going to do the same thing on this one. Now, what I'm going to do is simply dust the outside of all of these petals with the white. See if I'm in frame here. There she goes. Doesn't want to work because it's so cold. And again with the torch. And that, as you can see, is pretty much the basis for the paint. Alright, when you weld the leaves on, you're going to want to stagger them in such a way on the stem where they come pretty close to the top to all being equal in their position to the bloom. You want to have a little bit offset, but not much. You want the true offset to be down here on the stem, that way it looks more like a real flower. Well, that's going to be the end of this video. I am going to put some still shots of both of these two irises together. I'm not going to weld the leaves on the other one. This is the one that I started with. This is the actual one I made my mother for Christmas. But I am going to take pictures of both of them together. They will be at the end of the video, along with a detailed shot of all the parts on how this was put together and all the measurements on those parts. So, until the next video, this is Jeff, freezing at Darkmoon Metals. I will see you again soon.